Hello, my name is Quinten Stokkink and welcome to this talk about our paper on the foundations of peer-to-peer reputation, which I wrote together with my colleagues Alexander Stannat and Johan Pouwelse. Now, why are we here? The future is decentralized. We have decades of peer-to-peer experience. We no longer need central intermediaries online, and Bitcoin will obsolete the banking infrastructure. We have scientific evidence that both online and offline, if you put people together with a common goal, they will, together, create something useful. This is called social capital. We also have decades of research into reputation mechanisms to reward good behavior, and yet we must ask the question, why is eBay still here? Centralized services are still dominant on the internet. Why? The obvious problem is the complexity of decentralized reputation and its attacks, and that there has been no single solution that has been around for long enough to address these complexities. Science just keeps reinventing the wheel, and our aim with this paper was to put a stop to this. We dove into related work to analyze the commonalities and ratifications of design decisions and produce a concise list of axioms that can be applied to future reputation mechanisms, provided they fit our model. During the remainder of this presentation, you will see two models. We will start by presenting the simple model. However, when evaluating the consequences of this model choice, we will, quite shockingly perhaps, discover that this model will not actually work in practice. We will then proceed to show you 3 relaxations which you can apply to our simple model to actually use it in practice. The end result of our paper and this presentation is to present you a toolbox of 7 axioms that you should apply when creating new peer-to-peer reputation mechanisms. You can see them on your screen now. By the way, now would also be a great time to pause the video if you're watching this on YouTube, or take a screenshot if you're watching this live. We won't show these axioms in this format again. Throughout the remainder of this presentation, we will present to you the motivations and intuitions belonging to the more rigorous mathematical evaluation we give in our paper for these axioms. Now, on with the models. We will start with the simple model. In this model, our aim is to capture the phases in between the events that happen between peers and their resulting reputation. It all starts with interactions between peers. At some point, 2 peers will come together in a system and report that a transaction has happened in the system and that other peers should know about this. Take, for example, a car sharing service. In this example, you may have a common pool of cars that network participants can use. Once you're done using a car, you would want the rest of the network to know that you no longer have the car in your possession and this car is now free to use by other peers in the network. And, perhaps more importantly, you want to keep making use of the car sharing service in the future. So, you want to let the rest of the network know you're an upstanding citizen that faithfully returns to the network what he has used. We now need to translate the report of returning this car to the network as an increase in reputation. To transform events in our system into reputation, we must first transform our events into something that a computer can reason about. This is what is commonly known as the work layer. What this layer does is that it assigns scores to interactions in the system. In our car sharing example, this would mean that, just as an example, sharing a car would gain you 5 score points and consuming a car from the network would lose you 5 score points. Finally, in the reputation layer, the resulting reputation is calculated. Generally, consuming resources from the network will lower your reputation and adding resources will increase your reputation. In our simple model, we initially impose 3 restrictions. Firstly, all events in the system happen synchronously. This means no 2 events will occur at the same time. Secondly, all work for the network is symmetric, meaning that consumption and production of a network resource are scored equally. Lastly, we assume there are no hidden preference relations. 2 parties with equal reputation should be equally attractive to interact with. For our model, we initially derive 2 axioms. The first axiom states that all network participants start with a minimum reputation score. In our paper, we motivate this mathematically, but the argument for this axiom is that users could otherwise create many fake accounts, called sybils, to harvest a small amount of resources with their small amount of reputation. Having a larger amount of sybil identities would then also yield a larger reward. A direct consequence of all participants starting at the minimum reputation score is that any reputation function must have a non-asymptotic lower bound. The second axiom we derive is that no user should be able to consume more from the network than he has produced. Otherwise, a defection attack is possible where the user leaves the system without reciprocating an equal amount. In our car sharing example, this would mean taking the car and driving off into the sunset. However, now we arrive at an impossibility result. Who is the first consumer in a system where everybody must start by producing? The answer, of course, is nobody. Our model cannot be both attack-proof and allow interaction, so we will need to relax our model a bit. In our paper, we define 3 relaxations to our simple model to allow interactions to take place. Note that these relaxations do not invalidate our previous 2 axioms, nor are they mutually exclusive. You can pick any of these relaxations you want to kickstart interactions. The first relaxation is allowing parallel work. The idea here is to settle all the work in rounds as to create a zero-sum game. In our car sharing example, this would be making sure that whenever a car is taken from the network, something else of equal value is added back into the network. In other words, paying a collateral. The second relaxation is allowing for work to go unconsumed. Now, this is probably the most natural way of thinking of resources, but also a vulnerable one. Imagine in our car sharing example that everyone could add new cars to the network. If anyone adds a ridiculous amount of cars to the network, the value of a single car would go down to almost nothing. In the case of cars, you might not care too much, but think about someone having the ability to mine infinite Bitcoin, for example. The value of the currency would drop to 0, which is not good. Now, if you're an investor, don't worry, Bitcoin has a market cap and severely limits the creation of new resources in the network by using crypto puzzles. And then lastly, we have the relaxation of seeded work. This relaxation allows some peers with established well-known identities to start with reputation. With this relaxation, you would obviously allow these established identities to attack the system, but practically though, the idea of seeding some identities with reputation is a common one. I mean, we all trust the DNS root nodes, for example. Having made sure that users can actually interact in our system, we will now move on to give 3 axioms in quick succession. Firstly, by performing work in a system, your relative contribution should increase and thus change the reputation of others. Otherwise, no amount of work you do will make you favorable in the network, which is in direct conflict with the purpose of reputation mechanisms. Expanding upon our previous axiom, we state that performing work must increase reputation. Once again, we show this in mathematical terms in the paper, but intuitively it should be evident that in the other 2 cases you would either reward not interacting or consuming from the system with the ability to consume even more from the system. Then the last axiom in this train of thought is our 5th one. Consuming from the network must lead to a decrease in reputation. Otherwise, once again, we would be rewarding consumption from the network. So, rounding off these last 3 axioms, we now know that an increase in work must lead to an increase in reputation, and a decrease in work must lead to a decrease in reputation. Which, to the trained eye, might seem like a non-decreasing or monotonous function, but it is not. Even though reputation functions seem to be non-decreasing functions, they are actually not well defined, as doing nothing may lower your reputation, which is a direct consequence of our 3rd axiom. The intuition behind this is that, say in the example of car sharing, you start by donating a car to the network. In the beginning, if you are the only one that donated to the network, you will gain a lot of reputation. However, if you then stop interacting with the network and other people make equal or even bigger contributions to the network, your relative reputation will go down. Then, finally, our 7th axiom reflects on all previous 6 axioms and states that any reputation function must be defined on the interval that is right open and left closed. Users must start from nothing, or you allow attacks on the system, and users must always be able to gain reputation if they do more work. To conclude, we have given you a toolbox of axioms by which to check if your reputation function is attack-proof. We have, however, not given you a complete blueprint by which to design future reputation mechanisms. We also, for the sake of brevity, ignore the interplay with incentive mechanisms or asymmetry in work scores. If you have any remaining questions, we hope to hear from you during the discussion.